would you care to venture what is more likely to happen first, the United States and China in some type of war, or teaming up against some different enemy?
I would say our odds of getting into a fighting war with China over the next 10 years are uncomfortably high. But let me quantify that. I think around 10%. So 90% chance here. We're going to work it out. We're going to have a modus vivendi, a way of living together. We'll get a glimpse of that, I think, in this summit. But yeah, in the near term, we're probably on two different sides. But as the century unspools, and that's the whole point of the new book, 2084, by 2084, the U.S. and China are allied. And that, I think, is not unrealistic either.
What allies us? Certainly not values.
Not in the least. What underlies and aligns us is a shared desire for a functioning global economy. In a word, money aligns us, brings us together. I think that'll be sufficient. 90% chance. There's an outlier, which you mentioned already, which is Taiwan. If Taiwan declares independence, goes off on its own, then yes, you're looking at cracking that relationship and actual combat. But I think the chances are we can navigate these waters.
Well, they are dangerous waters. We're showing video of the new Chinese Navy and military, how we got it. We mined the Chinese People's Liberation Army's Twitter feed, and they have provided us with all of these videos. Elliot, you think about how the United States got to look at Iran's military, much of it supplied by the Chinese during this war. The Chinese also got to look at the American military and how we fight wars during the war with Iran. Who comes out perhaps more shaken? Who comes out more reassured of their abilities?
I think it's a little bit of a toss-up. I mean, I think when we look at what's going on in Iran right now, obviously, the United States outmatches Iranian military capability. But what we're seeing is that, military capability isn't the only thing that matters in war. Strategy matters. The politics around the war matter. And the fact is that in Iran, the United States, we are fighting a war of choice, whereas the Iranians are fighting, at least the Iranian regime is fighting an existential war. So, when we project forward, to whether it's 2034 or all the way out to 2084, yes, the military hardware matters, but also political realities matter, and that's what we're trying to do in these books, is imagine them.
Political will matters
Absolutely.
as well. If there's some type of climate issue, then the whole world is threatened. It becomes an existential crisis for all of us. Before that happens, there is the issue of what happens with Iran, and obviously, if the Chinese are going to help with Iran, they would want something in return. Here's Marco Rubio talking about that.
Well, if all the countries of the world economies are melting down because of this crisis in the Straits, they're going to be buying less Chinese product, and the Chinese exports are going to drop precipitously. So it's in their interest to resolve this. We hope to convince them to play a more active role in getting Iran to walk away from what they're doing now and trying to do now in the Persian Gulf.
Admiral, does the Chinese help us out of goodwill and comradeship? Because, as you point out, money in the world economy, or are they going to demand something in return?
Both. They want the money. They want a functioning global economy, but you bet they're going to look for a quid pro quo. And I don't think you have to be a sinologist, an expert in China, to think that it'll probably be something to do with Taiwan. I don't think it'll be a demand that we completely break with Taiwan, but the weapons package that we have on the table, 14 billion or so right now, that could be at risk. And I hope President Trump follows the lead of his advisors and doesn't try and cut a sudden surprising deal that really gives away the farm on Taiwan, or should I say gives away the fabricators where these high chips are made.
Well, and because if all of a sudden China controls the chips, then they control AI, which is a whole different part of this. Maybe that is 2134 is the next novel. I at least got Elliot to smile with that. But you think about what right now the Chinese are doing in terms of ramping up their military and ripping off U.S. military hardware. Can we trust the Chinese to live up to any deal that is made here? And to that point, in a novel about 2084, how do you purport to get the Chinese to be trusted as allies if we can't even trust them as not at least enemies, but adversaries right now?
I mean, I think the one thing we can trust is not necessarily the Chinese, but we can trust systems that are built on alignments of interests. And at this point, it seems as though a meltdown of the global economy, it's not in the United States' interest, it's not in China's interests either. And we're seeing that in Iran. We're seeing the way that economic interests play into the politics of war with what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, project that out by 10, 20, 30 times as to what would go on economically if you were to have a similar type of situation in Taiwan.
Yeah, whatever's happening in Iran is child's play to the markets if all of a sudden the Chinese take the Straits of Taiwan and take Taiwan. Michael Pillsbury, who has a lot of experience with China, perhaps is not exactly optimistic.
The Taiwan issue could lead to some real problems if the U.S. side insists we're going to continue selling, $12 billion of weapons to Taiwan all the time, or we don't accept that Taiwan's part of China. Same thing with some other issues. There could be some real friction. The Chinese demands may be a little bit too high for Mr. Trump to meet. Same thing on the American side.
Admiral, we won the Cold War against the Soviets by escalating effectively, both economically and militarily in terms of what we are willing to do. I'm wondering why there is not more talk about doing that to the Chinese to prevent some kind of conflict rather than seeming to believe that we can make deals with them.
Huge difference is between a Cold War where there's the U.S. and USSR not economically interlocked in any way. We were decoupled in the terminology of the day. And secondly, in the Cold War, both sides were trying to change the other's political system. So pretty big difference here. At the end of the day, I think what we want to do with China is we want to kind of bend that relationship. We want to get fentanyl right. We want to get them to back off on cyber. We need them to get away from these preposterous claims of owning the entire South China Sea. We don't want them to invade Taiwan, but we want to bend them. We don't want to crack that relationship because if we do, global economy goes up in smoke. So I think it's a more delicate process than we went through in the Cold War.
Well, certainly now there's mutually assured destruction in more ways than one, than just with nuclear weapons economically. Elliot, I'm going to end with you because the Chinese seem to be willing to do things that we are not. I'm speaking specifically of COVID. I think if we killed 1.5 million Chinese with some disease that we had created, or many times that number, if you look at it relative to the populations, there would be a totally different response than what the U.S. response has been to China. Do they view us, because they created COVID, they let it leak, they lied about it, do they view us as weak for not responding?
I think, as much as, this isn't the Cold War, there is definitely an undercurrent of our conflict with China, that it is the testing of two ideologically different systems, a centralized authoritarian system versus a classic republic and democracy. And so once again, the American system is being tested, this time in the shape of a centralized Chinese system.
Yeah, it's amazing. I haven't seen the Wuhan Lab of Virology video in a while. Elliot, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Good to see you. Admiral, appreciate it. Next time, gentlemen, back on set. 2084 is the novel. Perhaps some good news could come out of the Chinese visit for Donald Trump.